Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the hottest day of the year in the United Kingdom, about 25 degrees centigrade. I'm very pleased to say we've created this Hangout especially for our European members and stakeholders every Wednesday at 3 p.m. UK time, 4 p.m. Central European time, and hopefully just in time for some US attendance in the morning as they enjoy their morning coffee. Sorry, I'm having to. Fourth European Hangout, and we do already have a planned program for you all over the next 6 weeks to mid-June on a range of topics, finance, technology, and commercially related, of course, with the aim of discussing the topics concerned on an internationally wide basis. And we hope these conversations and Hangouts will help to enrich everyone in the current environment. The kind of topics we have and speakers will be on areas such as risk mapping the hotel guest experience, renegotiating SLA and SaaS contracts, cash alternatives and hygienic payments, and finally, 5 bets in the next 5 years in tech transformation in restaurants and hotels. If you, however, do have any topics and suggestions, then do please let me know. Today's topic is focused on finance, but also keeping the business live. Our speaker is Paul Nisbitt, CFO of Valor Hospitality in Europe. Paul has been in the industry for some time now in commercial and finance roles with companies such as Red Carnation, Le Méridien, Malmaison, and Principal Haley. Paul and I have known each other for some time now. And in fact, I think Paul has been to every high-tech Europe and led the CFO discussions at our CIO and CFO summit each time. And we were even on a discussion group panel last week, only last Thursday. So Paul, what are the challenges of a CFO in Europe today?
Probably a few challenges. Just take a slight step back if I can, Carl, quickly, just to talk about, if you take through take the big things we've been through over the last probably 20 years. We've dealt with foot and mouth. We've dealt with post 9/11, global financial crisis, just to name 3. And all of those you've dealt with, but you've dealt with in an environment where you've still been trading. So you've always had some sort of cash coming in, and you have to cut your cloth to what they are. But, you know, we sat there, and for our business, we decided to start shutting things. We shut our spas and leisure facilities in the early part of March. And then obviously kept the businesses running, even though we were down to 2-3% until the 22nd, 23rd, when the government asked us to shut. So immediately you're into a very different situation, because when you have no cash coming in, you're immediately facing a lot of other commitments you've got, but there is no immediate way of earning out of that. So cash becomes king, where in times when you've had, you know, post 9/11, we got down to 40-50% in London. The financial crisis, you were suddenly down to 60 or so. So yes, but you were still trading through it. I don't think there's very much anyone's ever been in this scenario where overnight your business shuts. And I think you have to think very, very differently. And the immediate issues from there are, I mean, I was in Meridian post 9/11, and we really knew that we had major problems, and we started to go every meeting with us, and every conversation was being minuted, conversations were being dealt with, but you were still in a workout kind of scenario. And I think the first thing that I noticed, and the first thing that we had to do, was we just had to step away from conversations for a period of a few weeks, because we actually had to take stock, because we actually didn't know how do you work your way through something when you've actually got no income, but you've got a lot of commitments. So you immediately have to work through that. So it's like when I went through the global financial crisis, when I went through the Meridian restructuring, you had lawyers, you had people with you, and every decision had to be managed and documented. We weren't in that situation this time, but we had to take the same approach. So we just stepped back from everything, and I'll touch on how we dealt with things, but we had to say, what are the big issues on the table? What's the noise? And I have a thing, and I've talked to guys, and some of them are on today. I talk like a bullseye target. And what I say is you focus on the stuff in the middle, and it doesn't matter what's around the side, because until you resolve the things in the middle, everything else is noise. And you forget the noise, forget the burning issues there, focus on what's in the middle, and as you resolve the things in the middle, the things on the outside come in. And you just work systematically through those things. So I literally draw myself a target with a bullseye and write 2 or 3 things in the middle, the things that are in the next ring, the things in the next ring, and then you just kind of move them in. As you resolve the first one, you move the next one in. And you say to guys, I understand that's happening, but it's not in that target zone. It will just have to be dealt with. And I think it's that clarity of thought and that clarity of how to go through things, which is vital, especially when, you know, we're in absolute unprecedented times. We still do not know really if we're going to open on the 4th of July and what we'll open to. So we've actually got 5 hotels open today, and we'll open 3 next week. Very limited service, but we're still being asked, well, what does that opening look like, a proper opening? And we don't know, because the government haven't told us yet what we can actually open. So, as I say, it's unprecedented times, things taken out of your hands. So it has to be about, what are the big issues? How do you deal with the big issues? And I'll come on to those in a second. And it's the clear thinking and go, I understand that's an issue to you, but it's not a major issue. And it is frustrating because everybody's got their own agendas. Everybody's got things they want answered. But some of the things you just have to say, we just can't deal with that at the moment. And it's on the board, we'll come to it, but it's just not the 1 or 2 things that make this business survive. And everybody has their agendas and everybody's got their really important things, but you need to align your board to the 2, 3 most important things and just say, that's all we're going to talk about until we've got to a scenario that we're happy. And then how do we want it to play out? So taking that on board, we started in late February to start looking at what we call our cash burn, classic American words that come in. And the biggest one that none of us have ever really heard of before was furloughing, until a few weeks ago. And suddenly now we're all experts in furloughing, but it's not even in a lot of employment contracts in the UK. But what we started in late February was, right, what is our cash burn? Because some of the owners of our assets are in the Far East. And so we were getting feedback from January about what was happening. They had shut some hotels in Thailand and things like that. So we were, though we couldn't feel it personally, we were still trading February in 80 plus, 80, 70, 80% occupancies. We were getting feedback. So we'd understand what was coming. So we started looking at our cash burn, and we literally just worked through 2 things. We worked through a P&L and just sat there and went, this is the P&L, right? What is variable? What is fixed? What is semi-variable? And just dealt with those things and said, if they're totally variable, okay, fine, there'll be a lag, but they're dealt with. And then we just worked for each line, did all of that. We then did the same thing with every contract. And we sat there and I had 2 of my team literally go put every single contract we've got through. What can we do? What do we have to keep? What can we talk to? And we challenged every contract. Conversations the likes of, look, we're going to be shut for a period of time, so you can't come in the building, you can't do that. What do we cancel your contract, or how will we do it? And most people said, actually, a lot of the guys just turned around and said, look, we're not going, we'll bill you as normal, we'll credit it back at the time, and then if we've got a 12-month contract with you and we say we get 3 months for a shut, can we add 3 months onto the end? So we just basically worked with every single main supplier and just chatted to them and said, look, you can't come in our buildings, you can't travel. What do we need? And we focused fire life safety, we focused on IT contracts, we still need certain things running. So we did all of that through at a time and really got to a point where we had a starting cash burn, and we did it out for 4 months. And then we looked at the stuff and said, well, actually, after a period of time, what could you come down to, and work through that really clearly. And we're still addressing it now. So even though we're 6-8 weeks in, we're still, some things are being dealt with, and certain suppliers are coming up with different ways to help to limit the cash. Because when you've got nothing coming in at the top, you've got to go to your stakeholders and say, we need X million to stay afloat. And the worst thing they want to know is, well, what have you done to mitigate that? How have you got that to a level where it's the least amount we have to put in for an unknown period? And that's the thing. You think if you have a fire, or you have, you have an incident, if you go back to the scenario around Cheltenham and that, when the flooding, if you go back, probably 8-10 years ago now, and the whole area shut for 6 weeks because the water sanitation plants failed, you knew it was a 5-6 week window, and you managed yourself for a 6 week window. We still don't know today when we're really going to open, because if everything goes right and if everything happens as everyone plans, we will hopefully be able to open hotels fully to the general public on the 4th of July. But there's a lot of ifs in that journey between now and the 4th of July, and that 4th of July could be the 20th of July, could be the end of July. If we see some spikes as the first phase of the unlocking comes through, and the second phase, we're the end phase, we're going to keep being moved. So the cash burn is really key, because it gives your investors that confidence that you're doing everything you can. And I touched on it on our webinar last week. We were asked by IHG and Hilton to advise them what we needed to get through this, because they were being in discussions with the government. And we asked for 5 things. So we asked for a VAT deferral, a PAYE deferral. We asked for support to help the living wage, because it's quite obvious that was going to be a massive cost. We asked for a rates cancellation or rates deferral, and we asked that they announce that that COVID-19 was a pandemic, so insurance policies would begin. And if you go back to 9/11, the government never asked us anything. I was running Meridian UK, and we had hotels like Grosvenor House, Waldorf. We had some of the biggest hotels in London, and the government never engaged at all. We won £30 million of rate rebates, where Gerald Eve asked myself and about 4 other big hoteliers got together and got all the information to go to the government and fight the VO to get this. So this time, to actually be in the 17th of March and the government are asking us an opinion of how they can help hospitality was a massive step forward. And we never envisaged in my life that the furloughing would be how they went. We just asked for support for the living wage employees, because we could see that if they didn't support it, then the likelihood they were going to go onto the dole list. So our view was, if you can support, there's a route round to keep people employed. So they're talking on furlough. So then they came up with furlough, and we had percentages coming, feedback from Hilton, IHG, where we would look like we were going to get 60%, maybe even 70%. And then, of course, suddenly it's 80%, which has made a huge difference to a lot of businesses. You cannot underestimate how this is supporting our industry. But, one of the gentlemen that's listening in the moment, Derek, who works for me, I think he's on his 6th reiteration of the furlough calculations, because we started and then the government changed the rule. They tweaked the rule, they tweaked the rule, they tweaked the rule. So everything you've been doing, you've been fine-tuning. And it's frustrating, but I think that's the same. We're in a position where we're getting the support. We've got to work it, and we've got to maximise what it is and how we use it for the foreseeable future, because it is the only way that we fundamentally, with no revenue coming in, that we've been able to employ and keep employed so many people. And we've got, in 3 businesses that I look after, we've got 1,500 people on furlough. So you imagine, without that money coming in, that's a lot of people that the lives change. It's very hard. But the way we've said is, by going on furlough, they're supporting our businesses. They're allowing us to come out the other side. So it is really key. And as I said, I touched on the other part to do with a cash burn is, I think it's the communication with the owners, and the community for us is owners of the businesses, because we manage hotels and we manage businesses for people. So once you understand your cash burn, then to be able to communicate that, and it's never going to be good news. And obviously, if you say your cash burn's 1, they're going to want it to be 0.5, and that's all going to happen. But the more you've got your facts, the more you've done your work, the more you communicate, and you communicate on a solid footing, then everybody can make decisions. And our jobs are to make sure that people have the information to make those decisions, and that we contribute to those decisions. But ultimately, unless you are the owner of that business, you've got to respect that other people have got to take that on board and work through it. And you've got to redress it. As I said, that document's live. We're looking at it weekly. We got our first P&Ls for April, and we were within about £100,000 of our cash burn. So at the end of it, we were actually slightly over, and that was because I was quite aggressive on the bad debt provision that I wanted to put on the business because of where we are at the moment. But if I'd taken that out, we would have been under our cash burn. So I could immediately go back to the business and say, I can see the hard work you've put in place over this 4 or 5 weeks. And I think they then understand that we're all working on the same point on what we're trying to do. So I think it's really vital that if you haven't done that and you don't keep readdressing it, I ask you to go back, get involved in doing that every day and look at it and use it as your guide. If you're operational, you have what you call your checkbook, where you look at what you've got to spend and you log it, and you do that. And we've all done that, the old classic checkbook of how much we've got to spend every week and every month as we go to our forecast. This is just a reverse with no income coming in. This is the same thing, but you're just doing it on what we say as a cash burn. The second thing is managing your stakeholders, and I've touched on that with owners, but the big thing then, and that's a bit way when I said we just went radio silent for a little while, and the only thing really with that was once we understood our cash burn and we understood what we could collect, because obviously everybody still has a ledger that needs to be collected and cash that's owed by others, we focused on 3 phases of a cash flow. We focused on a daily 90-day forecast. So we do a daily forecast of cash for the next 90 days. We update that 3 days a week. We took that through to 180 days monthly, where it really went through the end of the year. And then we took it through to the end of December 2021. So we have really granular daily cash. We have a monthly cash that we would normally run to the end of the year, that we then ran through to the end of the following year, 2021. And we put clear assumptions into that, so that whenever we presented it, basically we sat there and said, right, we need to make sure our assumptions are very clear, so that when anyone receives this, they understand what our assumptions are. So when did we think we'd open? What did we think would happen when we opened? How do we think we were managing furloughing? How do we view certain markets, segments? And we made sure that was very clear in our presentation. So we reviewed it with our owners, so the owners of the assets, and then we presented it to the bank on their behalf. And so we basically very, very quickly opened up the conversation that everybody understood what we thought was going to happen in the next 12, 18 months. And, and that was really key, because before you have a conversation with anybody, you need to understand what is your ask. So if you're going to talk to the banks, the first thing they want to know, well, what is it you want us to do? What is your issue, and what is what you want us to do? The reason I say that is you can't keep coming back to the well. You can't come back a month later and a month later and a month later, because they're not interested. They've got numerous customers to deal with. They want to understand from your point, what is it you see as the ask, and why do you see that? And they want to stress test you on your assumptions. So we spent a lot of time on that. And we spent days and every day through Easter weekend, we were on conversations constantly, trying to get down to actually what is it we think is the ask? What do we think the business will look like for a period of time, so that everyone bought in, and they may not like the numbers, they may not like the output, but they all understood where we were. So that was really that. And I'm just going to touch one more before we take some questions and can move in, because that drives into a forecast. Because you say, well, how can you do a cash flow without a forecast? So we made some very high level numbers and assumptions to make our cash flow work initially, because actually if you went to everybody, and we went to the 17 hotels and asked everyone to do a forecast for the next 12 months, some people are great, some people just go into a meltdown, some people are doomsters, some people are extremely positive, and actually you're wasting their time when their focus was the hotel, fire life safety, their staff, what was happening in their environment. So we made those top line decisions. We built our forecast on that initially. We then, after, went to the operations directors and the team there and said, right now, and our revenue teams, etc., said, now look at the big picture and now look at your individual businesses. Does it make sense? And it wasn't materially out. There's different months, there's different things, but actually it was quite a sensible view through to the end of 2021. The other thing is there was a lot of market information that's been issued in the last 5-6 weeks, and actually taking a lot of that on board and looking at some of the workouts that have come before, it's been really important to say, well, why do you think X is going to happen or Y is going to happen? And you look at that and you take through that. But what we did from that, and coming back to how we wanted to position the ask for the stakeholders, is we then run our covenant models for the 12 months going forward. So we've taken the cash, we've done the forecast and the assumptions, and we've done the covenants. So what we did is we put everything on the table and said, this is what it looks like. So actually, we'll now need to work out how we unpick it and put the jigsaw back together. And I think that fundamentally is a key to actually where we, as a CFO, you need to be. And I did, and I, until we had the jigsaw pieces joined up, I stepped away from a lot of communication internally, because I needed to focus on that. And I come back to the target we talked about earlier. That was my primary focus, where other people dealt with the health and safety, dealt with our employees, dealt with the cash management of collecting the debt, and everybody had their jobs. But I had to put the jigsaw together that said, like, this is where we are, and we're very fortunate that our owners in America, you know, Steve from over there, was exceptionally good to bounce things off and constantly challenge each other at where our assumptions right or wrong. And, you know, we've both been through numerous different events that we can say, well, actually, look, that's where they're going to come from. So how have you thought about that? So we were stress testing our assumptions to build our models, because you don't really want to go into a conversation where you've not thought about what's the other side going to come back to you and ask. So we were playing good cop, bad cop. We were doing all of that. So we knew where we had a view of where we thought the questions were coming from, and how do we expect that to build the responses. So when we actually built the presentations, we put a lot of the things in that we knew they were going to ask. So you funnel down your conversation to, this is what it's about. And again, you try and clear the noise. And I keep saying noise, but there's so many things can distract you. It's clearing that noise away. So the conversation is on the 2-3 most important things that need to be covered at that point.
Great, absolutely fascinating, Paul. Some great parallels there with Michael Levy the other week as well. And we've got quite a few questions come in here. I'm going to start with one from Heighton Rapero, who says, and you don't have to answer the first one of this, but Paul, for your hotels that are open, what occupancy and ARR are you running at? Which maybe in these times is not quite as sensitive as it might normally be. But
listen,
but the question that's probably is interesting, I'll just finish it with here, is have you worked out what occupancy and ARR estimate it is you need to achieve to break even?
Okay, I'm going to answer slightly different. So we normally take somewhere between about £300,000 and £400,000 a day, okay, across the 17 UK hotels. That's public knowledge. You can divide our revenue by 365. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. We're currently at £6,000 a day. Okay, so by no way, so you can work out from there, you know, we're selling 70, 80, 90 rooms a day across 5 hotels. So we're not, in some ways, we're not opening it for huge amounts. We've got some demand, but we're also opening them, and it's only for key workers. So everybody has to come with a key workers letters, etc. One of our hotels in Peterborough is probably running at about 40%. But the others can be running at 4, 6 rooms. And we've only had some open for a week or so, and they're building every day. But most of ours are logistics driven. So we've got railways, we've got the logistics companies, we've got some of the offices where people are working on logistics. So those kind of people are staying. And we only, we run a pantry. So you have your room and there's a pantry. So we're not providing any hot food or such at the moment. We can't, you know, so it is very much about a room. And, you know, we had one of the hotels linked to the SEC in Scotland. So that opened as they were creating that for a hospital. And we had all the teams creating that. The same our Crown Plaza in Harrogate opened for the Nightingale Hospital that was being built in the conference centre at Harrogate. So that opened, and then the accommodation dropped down, and then we're ready on standby should there be a second spike for that to reopen. So different ones in different ways. But part of it is we wanted to test our own, how we would operate under the social distancing. So some of it was actually, we have to have staff there running anyway because of fire life safety. So actually to take 8 or 10 rooms isn't actually a big stress for us because the core team are in the hotels 24 hours a day and we're not really providing much service. So we're surprised in our Glasgow hotel when we were supporting the SEC opening, we were getting up to 60, 70 rooms a night. And we were finding that the hotel could pretty much cope with those people without any extra staff coming in. So it actually proves something we probably didn't think. We probably thought we'd have to have more people in to run the hotels in this environment than we actually do. And I've followed and had conversations with a few people, and there seems to be a feeling that somewhere between about 16 and 20% is suddenly now the break-even point of what it could do for you to open really a rooms-based hotel. So we probably all thought it would have to be higher. But I think because the service is so different, you know, reception, you don't come up to reception, it's all keyless, and depending what style brand you've got. So I think it's going to be that kind of route of where that goes and how that works. It's interesting, we had 5 hotels that were digital key pre-COVID. So we had all the three DoubleTrees and the 2 AC Marriotts. And the best take-up we had was about 5% of the guests checking in were using digital key. What's that going to be now?
Yeah.
What is that going to be now? That's going to be 70, 80, 90%. You know, so you suddenly think everything's changing. And so suddenly what roles do people have to have and how do you work that through? So that's really where we are at the moment. What's the second part of the question, Carl? Sorry, I've kind of gone.
The break even, you've started to answer it about what do you, I mean, ARR and occupancy, well, one can go up, one can go down, but basically it's have you changed your view on what break even is, which to some extent?
Yeah, I think so. I think we would say on ARR, our style hotels are very much, a lot of ours runs on citywide events, big events. As I said, if you look at the fact of Glasgow, Harrogate, Birmingham, they trade in environments where there's big events, and we tend to maximise our RevPARs. We've got hotels with RevPARs of nearly 200%, etc. So we're probably not the norm because we see that that's going to be much more challenging for us, because until these big events can come back, we're not going to get that premium we got before. So we've done a modelling and forecasting. We have 3 models for 3 buckets for hotels. So it doesn't matter what you think next year's revenue is going to be compared to your budget for 2020. So we've got a base bucket that's the kind of norm where we say, right, we expect everything to be at that kind of level. And certain hotels we just see in the middle of that, they'll go into that bucket. We've got a second bucket is those we think that can exceed. So there's reasons in their marketplaces where we think they can do better than the average of our portfolio. And then we have those that we think will do worse. And the reason they'll do worse is they're very M&E dependent, or they're very city event dependent. And for an example, our hotel in Stratford, Crown Plaza in Stratford, it's a 400 people ballroom. Its social distancing now can take 80 people. So we've put the chairs down and said, how can you do it? So a room that drives your bedrooms, that drives your food and beverage, that drives everything about this hotel, has suddenly got a capacity that's gone from 400 to 80. So it's got 20% meeting capacity it had day before. So that hotel naturally is going to be underperforming even our average. And I think everyone's got to look at those things differently, and how do they, there isn't going to be one solution unless you are a business where everything's a cookie cutter. And if you're not that kind of, which we're not, then different businesses can go into different buckets. And you work them out that way as well.
Yeah, it's all variable, isn't it?
Yeah.
Stephanie Timsit in Spain has a question. Stephanie, would you actually like to ask your question?
My question is really about the future. Hi. I understand the whole crisis management, and I think that a lot of hotels have gone through it, even though it was not through COVID-19. I'm thinking, for example, when the Hyatt went into flame, or when the Mandarin Oriental went into flame, where more or less you can compare the situations. But the thing that I can see with COVID-19 is that a lot of governments in Europe are helping the industry, and therefore shouldn't we look at it with what are the opportunities of inputting some new measures in terms of technology, in terms of social distancing, which actually would be beneficial for us and cost effective. We are so conservative that I think it could be an opportunity. And my question, Paul, was, are you considering that? Are you considering also the cash flow that would involve, and are you selling that to your owners?
Yeah, I mean, there's different parts to that, but absolutely. Because we run branded hotels, slightly our hands are slightly tied in terms of what we can do into certain things, because we've always been arguing that the brands have been focused on revenue generation, not productivity in certain ways and certain systems. But I think that's going to change. So for us, there's a lot of things that technology is going to help us on productivity. Self-check-in. The brands have always been, when you look at upper scale hotels, they've always been slightly reticent to invest and develop the self-check-in, where now it's going to have to come. So a lot of things technology-wise that we've wanted to do have been held back, and I think that will come through. So I think that won't really be costly to us, because it's just about the change in working practices, the way they want to work. Paul Finch, who's on at the moment, was probably happy to, because he's probably been desperate to roll some of this out, and the brands haven't been as receptive. So I think we're all going to get that drive to there. I think a lot more about how we're going to serve guests. I don't think the standing up at the bar ordering your drinks is going to happen. So I think there'll be a lot more investment in that ability to order at your table, and the service will change, which personally I think will be good, because I think it's a better service in lots of ways. And infrastructure, we've currently gone to the owners of our hotels for one of the brands, where we want to spend quite a considerable amount in upgrading our Wi-Fi. And reason is because the three things that we know are going to be important is the cleanliness, the ability of the Wi-Fi, and the secure car parking. And what we're saying is, you've got your window now to do this and be ahead of the game. So, and I think if we get that in, then the ability to push more technology out will be great. So I do think it's the right time. Why do I also feel positive? A friend of mine is a nurse in the local hospital where I live. They've gone forward in 5 weeks. What they've envisaged will take 5 years to achieve in technology, because they've had to. And everybody stopped whinging in meetings and blocking things and having their own reasons why things can't happen. And they just had to do it. And I think the same things happen where some of the best ways, some of the hospitality technology has been held back by, it's not what we do. It's not what the customer wants. But I think all of those barriers have been kind of knocked away. And I actually think we as an industry can embrace technology now and provide such great service and what the customer wants, because we all look at what's happening now and how we've had to adapt in 9 weeks, and you just think how quick can we move to the next level.
Great, thank you, Paul. Got a question from Colin Bidwell. To be fair, Colin always has a question for us of one sort or another. So we welcome Colin. You're the second of your two questions that you've just put on the open chat. If you'd like to go ahead and ask Paul.
Hi, Carl. Hi, everyone. Sorry, late to the party, but I mean, obviously, this pandemic is sort of forcing a lot of people to open up beyond their traditional barriers, and that's kind of evident, I think, in terms of service provision. I guess if you look a level above that, do you see, I guess, hoteliers who are looking for obviously increased revenue streams to look at new partnerships at that level, and you look at sort of the whole lifestyle type of provision here? Obviously, you've got the Fosons of this world basically stepping to sort of diversified business streams where they integrate information effectively. Do you see sort of an opening up of, I guess, what might have been traditional mindsets at the partnership level, at the hotel level, as well as the solution provider level? Because
I think they will.
Yeah,
I think they will. And I think you've got to think those that have the cash and have that open mind are going to probably come out of this stronger. I think the brands have been on that, and certainly I can talk from a brand perspective. I think they've been working down those paths for quite a while. But I think you look at the investment that's come in and the branding that's come into hotel companies from lifestyle companies, from fashion houses. So I think all of that there is a route. Leisure is going to bounce back. Okay, domestic leisure will probably bounce back first. International leisure will bounce back. People want to travel. People view the point the world is small and they want to travel. So I do think that all of that being pulled together is going to happen. You've just got to look at, what is Amazon's play? What is Apple's play at the end of this? How do they work through things? It was interesting we were touching earlier on a conversation on another HFTP Hangout on Thursday night, where Apple are now massively investing in healthcare. Their apps and the phones are going to drive you so much. So this is a market that's primed for the Amazons, the Apples to come in and take control of so much more. So I do. I don't have the solutions on, in terms of that, but I think that everyone has seen how things have changed, how things are happening. Now, I run one of our investments is a restaurant up in Edinburgh, and that started, never even contemplated doing a home service, and now it's happening, it's developing, it's going further. And you look at where Uber Eats and Deliveroo and this is going, these guys are going to they're not going to let go of the fact that they've now got control over so many more people ordering. They're going to take control over more of that. We have one of our hotels where we have a Starbucks, and we do breakfast, and Deliveroo is your offering post-breakfast. And we have the menu, it's all labeled, we do it all, and it's highly successful, and it's one of the highest scoring guest satisfactions for food and beverage, but we actually don't provide it. So the world is changing with that, and I think digital control, those companies are, we need to embrace it, and I think they'll move at a pace that we can't even think about. We'll just see things as they take on control and they move into new areas.
Okay, Andrea's asked the wider question here about how can we assume people want to go to hotels and restaurants once restrictions are lifted to some extent. How have you and your team considered that? I mean, I imagine you talk about the open dates and things like that, but how have you assumed when things are open, people will start to come back out? And is it a V or a W shape in terms of the graph?
I think Howard had it right last week. It's a low bath. I don't see a V. I think the bath was probably the right view of last week. You all chat to your friends, okay? I can tell you now, the one thing all my friends are saying to me at the moment is we just can't wait to get back together. Okay, we want to get. Let's go and travel. Let's go and see. Let's go and see friends again, because we've all suddenly been locked into this cocoon world where we can't get out. So domestic leisure will bounce back. Okay, there's no doubt about that, and I think that will happen. It's interestingly, if you mirrored what's happened in Germany and Italy, and they're starting to see occupancies rise again. They're starting to see inquiries rising, not all converting to bookings, but the big brands' inquiry levels over the last 2-3 weeks are all starting to increase. So that gives you the fact that the pent-up demand is there. The world has changed. Whether you will travel for meetings the way you did before, questionable. Whether you, you know, as I said before, I think there's going to be quite a time before big city events are going to come back on the agenda. But I think demand will come. There is, whenever you talk to people, they want to travel, they want to see people, they want to reconnect with people. So I think that will happen. Our view is we'll have less people in our hotels for a considerable period of time. We will obviously, knock-on effect is we'll have less diners, etc. But we expect more of our residents to dine with us. Why? Because they may not want to go out to dine. So our sleeper diner ratios will probably increase, but it won't count as for the fact that we've got a lot less people in our hotels for the next few months. But we actually think more people will stay because of that risk of, do I want to wander down out to a restaurant, to here, to there? But when you come in a hotel, you feel secure. The brands are giving you that cleanliness feel and that security where you actually go, actually, I'm going to stay in my hotel more. So there's a bit of more, we'll have more people eating who are in our hotels, but obviously less people. And as I said, take that through, if I've got a meeting room that can hold 400 and we can only sit 80, we've got that problem anyway. Are we going to have to open up meeting rooms to become extra parts of dining rooms? Possibly, so we can cater for people. You know, all our spaces are going to have to be re-engineered because of that. But that isn't us suddenly spending thousands redoing spaces. That's just going to be, how do we be clever in creating environments for people to eat? Do we have to go to the Disney route where you can dine at this time? You have an hour dining time, and then you have to go. We have to clean the tables, and then let the next diners come in. These are all things we've got to work through as we start understanding how we reopen the bars and the restaurants. And
do you see any of this being? Do you think any of this, whether business or leisure, being, shall we say, age segmented in terms of people who will travel, people who won't, people who will maybe do leisure, maybe people who do business, or is it just going to be the business that people are in?
I think you obviously twofold. I think the grey pound is going to probably be longer to come back. I think if you talk to your parents, you talk to friends, they're probably more nervous because they've been told that they're at risk. So I don't think that's going to rush back. I think we've already seen challenges with the very younger crowds who just basically don't like being told they can't go out. So I think that's going to be a challenge, and that's why I think some of the nightclubs and some of the bigger bars are going to be a real problem to open for a while. So I think you're going to kind of, the bottom end is desperate to go out, the younger age. The older age is probably still going to be more cautious just because they see they're at risk. And I mean, you know, there's a scenario, I think, and I'll get the wrong numbers, but of the 35,000 people that have died, only 400 were only 400 were under 60 that didn't have an underlying health issue. So the age grouping is that there is a clear line in the sand that will determine things. But I think you will see certain age groups. You're going to see certain people who are more confident to go out and do that. But I think the business person that needs to do business, etc., will want to travel. But I just think you've got to realise there isn't going to be as many of them for a period of time. Your occupancies are going to be suppressed for quite a while.
Okay, great. We've got a question, funnily enough, from next week's moderator and speaker, Daniel Johnson.
You promised one.
Yeah. Daniel, go ahead.
Okay, I'll take myself off mute. Well, I don't know if you saw the recent report from Skift that the estimation of a 2% loss of global hotel supply as a result of COVID. I'm just wondering, Paul, if you think that is because we were, when we were talking about this in February and March, a lot of my colleagues and I were wondering just what the impact might be. Do you think that that estimate of 2% sounds high? Does it sound low? Does it sound about right? And do you have any notion of what segment that 2% what segment will bear the largest amount of the burden of that loss?
I think it's hard. I think it's hard to know, is the 2% right or wrong. It's a bit like the 40% of restaurants and bars may never reopen, which is a public statement that's kind of in the UK, where they just say they just don't know if commercially they'll ever reopen because the demand and the restriction rules will come in. Where do I see? I wouldn't want to be heavily invested in a conference and events market at the moment. I think that is a very, very hard, long road back over a period of time. And some of those businesses, and I know some from my Principal Haley days, I could see a number of those being reinvested into other things, because you do look at it and you think, if you can't have the volume of meetings and events that you had before, then I think some of the tertiary locations for some of those businesses would be seriously questionable. And so I do think that is a market I would be very nervous about if I was investing and asset managing into that area. I would, and I think that those that have underinvested going in, that will have no money coming out, I think some of those will not survive. Does that give you 2%? I don't know. But I'm just happy that our businesses are very heavily invested into in the last 5 years. We spent nearly £50 million on refurbishments and extensions of our assets. We've got some of the best brands available on the door. So we're in one of the best positions, and I'm nervous, not probably no. I'm still very cautious to how we come out. But I wouldn't want to be in some real tertiary locations with really underinvested product, because you're going to be a hard job to get your owners to put money in when they just had to underwrite a scenario you are now, and your market may not be as strong coming back out the other side. So can't give a percentage, but I can give you some markets.
Okay, thank you, Paul. We're just going to have one brief last question. It's come from Rob. And I'll ask it for him just to save a bit of time. But basically, it's the obvious question about employee contracts. Have you changed them? Are you going to change the nature of them going forward for more flexibility?
We haven't changed them. We don't envisage changing them. And so I think for those point of view, I think, we've got 3 or 4 different levels of contracts from, as anybody has, full-time, part-time. Some people are 0 hours because they actually want to be, because it suits their personal needs, etc. So I don't envisage we need to change our contracts, and I don't envisage we need to do that. But the other part I can read on the thing is absolutely more flexibility. I mean, part of what we did furlough, we kept all our financial controllers on, and they've been the person in our hotel. So they've been responsible to working with the teams on furloughing. They've been responsible for debt collecting. They've been responsible to working with me on the cash burns. All these things that some of the times it's years since a number of people have been in that granular detail, because they've been running 15, 20 million pound businesses. But everyone's had to be more flexible. Our core teams that are holding the hotels together at the moment for security, etc. We've got chefs, we've got HR managers, we've got maintenance managers, we've got some of the finance teams that have all volunteered to be doing these shifts where the hotel's been closed for security and fire life safety. So everyone's been more flexible, and they will be more flexible, because I think none of us know at the moment. We can't predict truly what's going to happen. And the one thing I'm going to say, and I've said it a few times, Carl, it's one of my statements, but one of the key things I would say is, the one thing I can guarantee for you is that I'll get my forecast wrong.
Yeah.
I guarantee that every forecast I've prepared so far is wrong, and I guarantee every forecast I prepare for the rest of this year is wrong, because everything is moving at such a pace that you've got to constantly go back to your forecasts and change them. So flexibility has got to be key. If you're going to bring people back from furlough, they've got to work in everything that's around you, and there can't be, well, that's not my job, because at the moment there isn't the demand to support that. So the real superstars are those that just roll up their sleeves and just get in with everything and say, how can I help? And I think that's where we are at the moment.
Very interesting. Paul, we're just extending the time we have just a little bit because we got some fascinating questions. And our friend from southern Spain, Mr. Hidalgo, Alvaro, Father Christmas as he's known to me, he's going to ask a question briefly. Alvaro.
Yes, but before the question, telling you all that we opened yesterday bars and terraces in the Costa del Sol, and there's no doubt that people are using them. They were packed.
I'm on my way.
Everything was completely packed all around. They were sitting down, taking the sun and asking for beers, paella and all that. I was completely surprised to see that. But again, that's what 2 months of confinement do. The question is, are we going to recover, are hotels going to recover a part of the demand that was going to or was driven to Airbnb thanks to that sense of security provided by the health and safety, by all the cleanliness procedures that are going to be there? Is that going to offset a bit of the loss of the reduction of the average client and the business client?
I think, yeah, I mean, it's hard to know, isn't it? Because there's no doubt that a lot of inquiries we're getting at the moment are looking at people having to work through the health and safety, the risks, and that side of life. So there's definitely, we've having it, a lot of our inquiries have been around that kind of thing. Where I see demand, I think there's a lot of people are saying, actually, because we're not going to be running at capacity, a lot of things that we thought about doing for a period of time we're going to bring forward. So I think that's where we're going to see more demand, not so much driven maybe out of some of the health and safety. I think, you know, at the moment, there's no doubt there's certain teams are being deployed to support. We've had inquiries for the army that have been brought in to support the NHS and people like that. So those kind of things are around and are happening. But we're also getting a lot of inquiries for some of the big utility companies that are saying, actually, we're going to, project we were going to do in 2 years' time, we're actually going to bring forward now, because actually there is the people out there to do it, and there is the workflow and etc. to get involved in that. So we're moving that way. So I think it's going to be a mix of what happens, of where the inquiries come from and where the volumes come from. So it's hard to know, and I think it's going to be in pockets, some of that, I think. So that's where I really think it's slightly different from saying just purely, is it going to come from one market or another? No, I think it's going to come from a lot of people looking and saying, actually, we've got this big project and can we kick it on quicker because we haven't got so much demand. We're doing something where we were going to plan something at the end of the year, but because our businesses aren't so busy now, we're doing it now. Because actually it's easier to do it with low traction and low transactions going through than it is doing it at full tilt, running 85, 90% occupancies.
Paul, I'd like to say a huge thank you for coming on and for volunteering after I'd asked you. That's been really helpful. I'm sure everybody's found tremendous value in it. Just like to say a big thank you, and I will hand back to Selena to close off and to remind you of our star speaker next week.
Yeah, thanks, Carl, and thank you, Paul, and thanks everyone for being with us today. Before we close, just a quick reminder that we will be back next Wednesday with Daniel Johnson, co-founder of Venza, discussing the importance of risk mapping the hotel guest experience in the post-COVID world. Also, remember that the best of HFTP, including High Tech, the annual convention, and the club forum is scheduled to be live in October in San Antonio, Texas. Again, thanks everyone for joining us today, and we hope to see you again next week. Thanks, and this closes out today's Europe Hangout.